In today's show, we discuss a variety of subjects and ask, what are your thoughts on this?
And now, the TNT Talk Show, daring to go where other podcasts fear to tread.
Hello, I'm Tony Fasula, and I share the stage with my esteemed friend and colleague, Tayo Boya. Tayo, hello, my friend, once again. I hope you're keeping safe and well.
Yeah, what the hell?
Oh, please. I start the day wonderful, feeling great. I speak to Tayo and... But no, I'm not affected. I'm positive. I'm still high and bright and cheery. Come on, say hi. Take some of my enthusiasm and say hi to our audience.
Well, audience, always remember the lucky ones die first. That's what I say.
Oh, dear me. No. Listen, audience, be bright, be cheery. I'm saying hi to you all. Enjoy the show today. Right, let's move on. In today's show, we discuss a variety of subjects and we ask, what are your thoughts on this? Now, obviously, Tayo and I will discuss these, but I would love you, the audience, to give us your viewpoints on the subjects we discuss. And a little bit more lighthearted. And the first one to kick things off, this is for you, Tayo, is should teachers be required to wear school uniform?
Well, I think absolutely they should be required to wear school uniforms. I used to be a teacher, and I wouldn't have minded wearing a uniform. In fact, I sort of did. Uniform
to match the students?
Not exactly to match the students, but because you could sort of based on school colors, and in a way it's striated so that it also showed seniority and things like that. Just kind of hierarchical.
What, like the prefects, for instance?
Yes, and so slightly different to show that you're a teacher in the first place. So there'd be certain things that you could identify someone as being a teacher straight away, and then you could identify heads of departments and people like that, and the school principal, and so on and so forth. So it was very hierarchical, but then school is a very hierarchical environment anyway. And what I like about it is that, I mean, like I said, I kind of wore a uniform in any case, because my uniform this was back in Nigeria, which is tropical and quite warm, so there's no blazer or anything. But I was always in a shirt, a tie, and trousers, and court shoes, as were all the other teachers. So the only difference we had was some wearing short sleeves and some wearing long sleeves, just depending on choice. But we all had to wear a tie, we all had to wear a shirt, we all had to wear court shoes and a belt. So there was no issue about that.
So there was a requirement to wear. I mean, it wasn't just smart professional. You actually were told you should wear this type of clothing.
Yes, which was a sort of uniform. And the ladies had their own standards, which of course I wouldn't know what those were. Nobody asked me. But they had their own standards. I think it was something to do with length of skirt. I mean, you could come in a mini skirt or anything like that. Tight bodices probably going to be prohibited. And I don't really remember how they were dressed, but definitely that would have been quite strict, because we were also in a conservative part of the country, which is the northern part of the country, which is Islamic area. So women would have had to dress quite modestly anyway, and it was okay. But I don't think there's anything wrong with having teachers wear a school uniform, especially if the school is then going to pay for the uniform. Then that will help minimize teachers' costs to a certain degree.
Well, I mean, you can tell the difference between teacher and student in most circumstances, because the students are generally younger than the teachers, so having a uniform for the teachers, not in the school colors, isn't that mimicking what the students wear?
It's okay. Can it not also make it a more egalitarian society then?
Yeah, I suppose.
We're all in this together.
Yeah. That would make sense.
And make it more, the word I'm looking for precisely is togetherness. But that's not the word I'm looking for. I'm not trying to say together. Corporate, make it not corporate in the sense of business, but make learning and teaching more corporate in the sense that everyone is involved in it together. Less of us and you.
Yes.
Me and them. Teachers and students.
Yeah.
Us and them kind of thing.
You're
More
together.
A
bit like army. The army.
A bit like the army, yes. It's common purpose.
Yeah.
That kind
it's
of
actually
thing.
quite a nice idea now thinking about it.
Yeah.
Because to be honest, I was a bit on this particular subject. I was like, well, teachers are adults. They should be having the willingness to choose and wear what they want, as long as it's, within reason, of course. It's like in a corporate environment. When you go in, you're not told what to wear exactly, but you're given some scope. Although that's not strictly true, because in some environments where you're customer facing, I mean, my experiences in the banking industry, if you go to a branch and everybody in the branch is pretty much wearing the same uniform. So it's to promote the bank or the business, they're all wearing the same.
Kind of branding, isn't it?
Yeah, the branding, indeed. So I don't see, actually, now that you mention it, why that wouldn't work in a school environment. And then the kids can see straight away who the teacher is because of their uniform and know that they're part of the same group. And also, I mean, could the teachers have a name badge as well, which so that everyone knows their name, which obviously helps the students as well as the other teachers, because sometimes you get a teacher come in new. If they got a badge, at least they know their name. It helps everybody. So that the uniform idea, actually, I'm changing my view on that. Actually, I think that's actually now a good idea.
Hey.
Yay! I thought it would be at odds, to be fair, but now that you've put it that way, it does seem to make sense. Let me think. Could there be any negatives to this? Could the teachers complain? Because they could say, well, actually, we need someone to fund this uniform.
Well, like I said, I think the school would have to fund the uniform. Ultimately, who's funding the school? I mean, okay, state school, the government's funding the school, but in private schools, it's the parents who are going to be funding that.
Yeah.
So it's not going to come out of the teacher's pocket. I don't think it should come out of the teacher's pocket because you are requiring people to wear it. You're
mandating it. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's their cost. It's the school's cost. Nothing to do with the teachers, I think.
No, you've actually you've changed my view there, because initially I was like, no, I don't think that's a good idea. Teachers are adults; they should choose. But now that you've put it in that context, I can see the benefits, and I'm actually struggling to find what the negatives are. In fact, if the school paid for it, it would only be, I suppose, some very young people the teachers in particular would feel that's being conformist, perhaps, and maybe education should be more broad-minded. You shouldn't be boxed in. You should be more open to learning and being. Education shouldn't be purely, rigmaroled and boxed in, whereas you should be more open-minded. And clothing, if you're regimented in your clothing where you have to conform, then that would naturally give that viewpoint that you're closed-minded almost. Whereas if you wear more, the teacher chooses their outfit, although it's still got to be within boundaries, of course. As you said, they can't come in with a mini skirt or tight-fitting clothing or naked even. They've got to be mindful. That gives them some more freedom, and that then means that the kids are free. But then that moves on to the other subject. We could then move it further, where you then ask, should kids wear school uniform along the same line? I personally think they should.
One thing is, I think the ancient Greeks, didn't they teach naked? And then wasn't everybody naked? Do I remember properly?
I'll be honest, I've not heard that.
One reason why women weren't allowed into classrooms because all the men were naked, I believe.
Really?
That you came in and did your ablutions and then you kind of stayed naked. I think I've got a faint memory So it's something that I'm not prepared to swear to in the court of law just now, but I do have a memory. I mean, don't forget, they were more relaxed about nakedness than we are today, because they used to conduct all the Olympics naked, didn't they? All the athletes were naked in the Olympics.
I did not know that either.
Oh,
I wasn't aware of that.
They were naked in the Olympics. They were naked when they were wrestling. And wrestling was a part of sort of the daily, rigor of health benefits and everything.
And the reason for being naked was? What's the benefit?
I haven't any idea. Bonkers, I suppose. A bunch of weirdos.
Wow.
Which is Tyler's way of dismissing anything he can't really handle. But I suppose that I've had some reason. Egalitarian, I think, was one of the reasons. Everyone's equal when they're naked.
Wow.
And speaking about that, one reason we have school uniforms is so that the richer children of richer parents do not have something to lord over
Yes.
the children of poorer parents. So,
Yes.
How in America you have these schools where someone can go in with $1,000 trainers and other people can't. Well, all that goes out of the window when you're all forced to wear the same thing.
Agreed. That's
And
where
I
I view that.
And I think that's a good thing.
Yes.
Finally, you touched upon the idea that it's created structure which is maybe stifling. I think that's something to do with the mental attitude of the teachers, because my classes were rambunctious and noisy and everybody loved them because it had nothing to do with school uniform. But at the bottom of it all, there was a sense of discipline because my word was law. And I think we can do that. We need to find the balance between freedom of expression. Funnily enough, I was just listening to someone just before we came on, before you and I came on. I was listening to someone, and the person was decrying the fact that children have to sit in a classroom behind a desk and sit still and be quiet. And so this is the very opposite of what childhood is. Childhood is the very opposite of sitting down in one place and being told to keep quiet. Childhood is about exploration, finding out how the world works, interacting with the environment. And he made the point that he was good at school, but he was good at one kind of thing, which is passing the exams, remembering what you were told, and regurgitating it in a way that the school wanted to hear. So that was fantastic for him, not so much for his friend, who was a genius at music and things like that, but the school just didn't accommodate that chap's genius. So I've heard this before, especially when I was a teacher, and I was looking for ways and means of trying to identify the different strengths and talents of my students and tailoring education towards those strengths.
Yes.
So, well, anyway, I think we'll come to the end of that topic. That there's more to be said about.
But you've hit on the head there. This is what makes the difference between a teacher and a good teacher. Now, if you treat pupils of individuals who learn in different manners, because we all learn differently, we're all different. You've got to tailor the training or the teaching based on the individual. You can't just have one method, and that's what exemplifies and shows a good teacher to just a teacher. And so, if you heard of VAC, VAK, visual, auditory, and kinesthetic, we all learn differently. Some of us are visual learners, some are auditory learners. Visual, some are auditory learners. They listen more, and some are doers, right? Yes, doers. And that's that. And we all have a bit of each, of course, but some a percentage a bit more. And that's what the teacher needs to discover in the individual and tailor the lesson according to the strengths of the listener, of the child. And that's a skill. And that's some teachers can find that quite quickly, others struggle. And that's why some kids do bad in some lessons, because the teacher hasn't yet discovered, has not discovered the best learning strategy for that individual pupil. But this is all part of the learning process, unfortunately. But
many of my maths teachers were like that. They were terrible. This is unfortunate, because maths isn't a bad subject.
Because it's also because of the subject matter as well. When maths is quite black and white, because you have a formula and you get an answer. It's like the IT people are the same, very black and white. But I got
one teacher in my middle school who was really good, and I love his maths lessons,
Yeah.
because he always made it sort of married it to something that was of interest to children. You know, if Superman had only 20% of his power, could he lift this rock? That kind of thing.
Yeah. He made
And
it
that,
real, that engaging, which is the best
yes,
way
and
of
then we
learning.
end up a
Really.
little bit of discussion about Superman's powers, and then back to the maths.
Yeah.
You know, and then you actually try to figure out, well, what percentage of power, you know, and then you start thinking about percentages.
And learning, yeah. Very
So
clever.
he was really good.
See, that shows a good teacher.
Yep.
But yeah, we need more of those. But yeah, going back to our question, which should teachers be required to wear a school uniform? I'm now converted, and I think yes.
Hooray! Excellent.
But you, the listeners who are listening in here, what are your thoughts? Please let us have your comments on this particular mini subject. Right, let's move on. Next question is, again, I will ask you, Taya, to start this off. Is age difference between two partners important in an adult relationship? What's your view?
I would have thought not. I mean, all we have to do is to ask President Emmanuel Macron, and I think he would say there's not a problem, because she was his teacher, wasn't she?
Oh, I don't know. I
Oh
don't know.
yeah. She was his teacher. And,
His school. So Macron's school teacher is now his wife.
Correct.
I did not know that. So there's obviously an age difference, but do we know how big that age difference is?
Well, I imagine it's pretty considerable. I mean, I could find out during the course of this show whilst you present your case, and I'll look it up. I
don't know whether it's important, in quotes, the age difference between adult partners in a relationship, but there's obviously some history as to the age difference between a male and female relationship. There's tended to be in the past a difference where the male tends to be older than the female. That seems to be a difference in age in past. We can look back in the past, and that was quite common. Whether that's important, I mean, nowadays we're seeing more the other way round as well, more examples of where the female may be older than the male. But again, is it important? As long as the couple, whatever couple they choose to be, are in love with one another, which is the underpinning of a relationship anyway, does age really matter? I mean, if the age difference is huge, I mean, we've seen in the press and the popular media where they highlight sugar daddy, where there's a massive age difference, or there's some wealthy individual and he's married maybe some female, or vice versa, who's 40 or 50 years younger. I mean, if that age difference is a whole generational difference, then you do have to question, is that really love there on most instances?
Well,
or is
does
it
have to be love, or does it have to be happy? And the answer to your earlier question about Macron, the age difference between Macron and his wife,
oh yes,
25 years.
So that is a generation, really.
That's a generation. But the point is, they seem to be happy.
And they're in love.
Does it matter? I don't know whether they're in love or not, but they're happy.
Yes. I think love should underpin it, because with love...
Love is a European ideal, I think.
I mean, happy, yes. Happy is the fundamental. If you're happy in life, you've discovered the meaning of life.
Yeah,
that's how I see it.
From Africa, I'm not even sure it's even happiness. It's more like duty. Okay. But I think behind it all, although it's rarely discussed, is that the people that as I know, they get married because they're supposed to get married, and then hopefully they're going to be happy.
What does that mean, supposed to get married?
Well, you get to a certain age, and you want to have sex. I mean, from a man's point of view, and as I'm increasingly becoming to understand that what I was told when I was young, that women weren't interested in sex, it seems to have turned out to be a load of lies. Apparently, modern women are quite happy to tell me online that, no, what am I talking about? They get interested in sex too. if you want to have sex in conservative societies, you have to get married. So you do.
Okay.
And hopefully you will end up being happily married. In the north of Nigeria, where I lived, which was, as I keep saying, a Muslim area, the divorce was quite easy. Apparently, in Islam, a man just has to say to a woman, I divorce you 3 times, and he really is divorced.
As simple as that.
As simple as that. Not so simple for the woman. It's simple for the man.
Hmm.
Now, where I come from, which is from the south of the country, we don't actually, we're sort of more Christians than Muslims. There are some Muslims down there, but it's a Christian majority area.
Yeah.
And by and large, divorce is really frowned upon. More like sort of 50s America kind of frowned upon. So it's really just not kosher at all.
Really tough to do as well.
Yes, it's not okay.
Hmm.
And in such societies, it's a lot more difficult to get divorced. It happens. I suppose the younger generation now, I mean, there was a time when I could honestly have said, I don't know anybody who is divorced. But now one of my cousins is divorced. And another cousin is separated from his wife, which is all kind of like very shocking to me because these are younger cousins, much, much younger than me.
Yeah.
20 years or so. So I suppose their generation, they're beginning to lose that kind of value that my generation has, where amongst my schoolmates, not a single one of us is divorced or even separated or anything. We just have to learn to get along with your wife. That's all.
Yeah, which is, you just have to learn to get on and
you learn
with the ups and downs of a
little bit of give and take. A little bit of give and take. Can't have it all your way. You can't have it all her way, and that's how you do it.
I think that's something that's missed in the youth of today. It's just take.
Me.
Take. And then, it's not the give bit. I'll give you a little bit, but if it's too much hassle, no, go, bye.
Yeah, forget about it. I was watching something last night. Very, very interesting, tangential to this discussion, but I'll tell you anyway, in which this female woman romance guru goes into schools in America. When I say schools, I do mean, I think, maybe first year university or final year of secondary school, because the students seem to be
quite adult.
Yeah, they did seem to be like 18-year-olds, something like that. They didn't seem to be, youngsters at all. She goes into there and she tries to tell them how to meet members of the opposite sex, because or at least people they're interested in, because apparently what is happening now is that if you approach a young woman, if a young man approaches a young woman face to face nowadays, apparently, it's seen as threatening.
Yes.
And you have to do it online.
Yeah.
And she said, that, and the thing that sparked this, what I'm telling you, she was talking to this class of people and she said, think about it. What you're saying and what you're doing is you are finding it far easier to jump into bed with someone naked and do all these intimate things with that person than go and have a coffee.
Yeah.
And she's saying, please start with a coffee.
Yes. And she's absolutely right.
And then one of the students interviewed said, well, it's a good idea because I saw this guy, I really fancied him. He was handsome and everything. And normally we'd have just ended up in bed together, but I took the lady's advice. I asked him out for a coffee because the woman's philosophy is the person doing the asking is the one to pay for the coffee.
Yeah.
Which is good, finally bring some equality back into things.
Yeah.
And this young lady took a fetching young lady took this guy out and said, during the course of the conversation, I realized, I don't really like him.
Mm.
And she said, it's nice that I found out I don't like him first rather than afterwards.
Well, of course.
Well, that seems to be news to them.
Wow.
Back to the young generation. That's news to them.
It's incredible. I mean, my youngest son, I mean, he's still an adult, but he's still the youngster.
Mm-hmm.
He's the one that said that if a male develops just the ability to chat to a female face to face, he says it's a superpower, because most men Now, this generation particularly have no idea how to do it because it's all online. So if they somehow learn how to engage small talk, chat to a female, he said you and I, when we were growing up, we would have to compete with other people doing the same thing. He says in his generation, nobody does it. So he's now trying to learn how to speak to women properly because he thinks that because he's got no competition. And it's like,
you should is the wrong term to use amongst youngsters. But for us, since we know what I mean, you should hook up with me, because obviously that's one of the things I'm going to be coaching young men to do. The MGTOW way, of course. But it's a very positive way, because it's taking women and knowing what they really are and how they really are and dealing with the reality of it, and not getting involved in obsessions, which could be very, very damaging to the psyche. So it's a superior way of actually speaking to women, I think.
I think you've still got to be relatable. Otherwise,
of course, relatable, not superior in the sense that it's not going to lead, it's going to protect the individual from falling, I was going to say head over heels. It's not, it's head over passion. Don't fall head over passion, head over lust. Mm-hmm. Going with both eyes open. And if we're going to be talking to women, we'll go to a cafe, we just talk to women. Try going in. If you don't want to hook him up with me, my advice is this: try speaking to women with no agenda.
Yes.
Don't try to get them into bed.
Yeah, exactly. Be normal.
Just normal. Have a coffee, make some noise, and then leave.
Yeah.
And don't worry about telephone numbers or anything like that. Just leave. And you'll soon find you can talk to anyone.
Yeah.
But be genuinely interested too is the other thing I'd say.
Yes.
What genuinely interested in what she has to say. But a lot of girls, of course, they're going to climb up and at that point in time, since you're not agenda driven, you can just pay for the coffee and just leave. Eventually you'll find somebody who wants to yak, and then you can yak.
Indeed. No, that's absolutely right. That's absolutely right. But let's move back onto the question about the age difference between two partners in an adult relationship.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if they're both happy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And adults, right?
Yeah, adults. This is adults.
Okay. So obviously there's no
relationship.
There's no pram stealing or what's the other one? Yeah. When you go to someone below the age of 16.
Oh, no.
All right. Okay.
No, that's not right.
And I think it kind of matters too, what age we start talking about, because, okay, let's say a 4-year difference is a 4-year gap.
It's nothing.
Between a 26-year-old and a 30-year-old.
Yeah.
Nobody cares. Yeah. Between an 18-year-old and a 14-year-old.
Yes.
That's kind of dodgy.
Yeah, that is dodgy.
All right. So dodgy. Even between, I'd say, a 16-year-old and a 20-year-old, it's kind of dodgy-ish.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still sort of okay-ish. But,
Yeah.
Now, if you make that as a 10-year gap, a 26-year-old and a 16-year-old, then you start getting to all those kind of issues like, don't you think, 26? I mean, no.
See, you're raising eyebrows.
Yes, exactly. So it matters that, how much matters and when matters. So the 25-year age gap between Macron and his wife, if he was 30 and she was 55, well, what the hell? I mean, he chose. I mean, it's kind of weird, but there you go. But if he was 10 and she was 35.
Yeah, that's wrong.
Well, so again, it matters when.
So when is the cutoff then? Is it at 21? Is that when it doesn't matter? Do you see what I mean?
I suppose adulthood. I mean, once you're 18, I mean, it's if you can vote and if people can levy taxes against you, to be honest.
But what remember, can we say? We're taking European adult is 18. If you go to America, adult is 21.
Yeah, well, so 21 for America, 18 for Europe. And of course, in Africa, you're never an adult whilst your parents are alive anyway. So my mother was still slapping cigarettes out of my hand when I was 26, for God's sakes.
Well, that happens now. It's no different, is it?
I'll never forget it, man. I had a cigarette. She didn't slap it out of my hand. She slapped it out of my mouth. It just came from nowhere. It was like, I was shocked.
Your mum is always your mum. That doesn't change. It's the same for any, it's the way it is. Same with your dad. They're still your dad. Anyway, so what's our conclusion on this? Is age difference between two partners important or not?
As long as the younger partner is of a suitable age.
What does that mean? We need
Well, it's an adult.
Okay.
At least legally an adult.
Yes.
Paying taxes. That would be good.
Okay. But okay,
right?
let me put a scenario. An 18-year-old and 18-year-old girl and a 45-year-old man.
Yeah, that's fine.
Would you not raise an eyebrow to that, though?
It's fine. I would raise an eyebrow, but it's still fine. I'll tell you why. Because it's in nature with our nature. Because she's young and fecund, and hopefully he is too. But one thing we know for sure is that at that age of 45, he should have gravitas within society. He'll have income. He'll have the ability to look after her and her children. And that's always been the way it has been with humans. So it's perfectly okay. If you invert it, a 45-year-old woman and an 18-year-old man, then we start asking about, well, what's he getting out of it? Because is she fecund still? Can she have children? And can she look after those children? And is that what she'd want to do? Because we instinctively understand Brifault's law. I don't think I meant Brifault, by the way, so let's forget I said Brifault. But we still kind of understand that women generally are not the breadwinners. How would she feel about the so-called man who she has to look after? So I think instinctively there are all sorts of societal issues there that we're going, I'm not so sure about that. But if they end up together and they're happy together, who are we to say otherwise?
Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed.
It's fine by me, and it should be fine by me. It's not actually nothing to do with us.
Yes.
Not our flipping business, to be honest.
Right. We've done that one. Let's move on.
What was your idea on it?
That was my one.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with it, to be fair.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, I do. I mean, like you, I suppose you would raise an eyebrow if, if I had a daughter who was 18 and wanted to date a 45-year-old man, I'd be questioning that. I'll be honest, as a father. I think, really? Now, granted, adult, they're of age, they're perfectly entitled to do it. I would still raise an eyebrow. I'd be,
What if the 45-year-old man was the Sultan of Brunei? I have a horrible feeling that your objections will suddenly evaporate into millions of dollars of, I don't really care, mate.
No, let's park that one. No. I don't know. I would certainly still have the view.
I'm not sure I don't have any view on that. I have the views. Don't forget that you get paid up front. I mean, I should pay up front. Your dowry has got to be paid, down. So get the dowry, get the house, get all that, get some things that can't be taken away from you, and then fine.
So you would be happy your daughter, for instance,
marry the Sultan of Brunei. If you have an introduction, Tony, please organize it.
Does your daughter listen to the show?
No, but I don't. I mean, I wouldn't have minded bringing her onto the show just now. So come and listen to. She'd be like, "Are you selling me, Dad?" I mean, I'm not trying to sell you. But now that you mentioned it, you can get millions.
Sultan of Brunei. Okay.
So this is the Sultan of Brunei. We've got to be serious here, man.
Oh dear. Anyway, let's move on.
Okay.
Right. The next one. This is an interesting one, actually, and I think you actually came up with this one. Is the Barbie doll, which most listeners are familiar with, is the Barbie doll a good role model for young girls? What's your view, seeing as you came up with this?
My view is that yes, the Barbie doll is a good role model for girls where it is racially typed. So okay. I don't think I want to see little African girls running around with the blonde, blue-eyed Barbie, because that would make all sorts of issues as to what you mean by what is pretty. Nor do I want to see a Barbie with a European aquiline nose and just a darker shade of skin. But if you create a Barbie, sort of like what we in Nigeria consider to be a beautiful woman, slightly larger than the European equivalent, I don't mean humongous, but slightly fuller figured, and with more African features, then yeah. Because what it does, I believe, and the reason I'm saying this is that it's aspirational for young girls. Then you maybe aspire to be more than these, sorry, I'm going to say these slobs that we see on the streets today. I mean, you look at, I feel sorry for, you were mentioning your son. I really feel sorry for him because young men like him.
Let's get back on what this is, the Barbie doll. I mean, there's a lot of debate about the Barbie doll anyway, of whether it actually is a poor role model. I think we're going to have to look and see whether Barbie doll is even still sold. If it is,
so what?
Barbie doll, is it actually still sold? Have we still got a Barbie doll that you can purchase, or has that been stopped?
I would imagine we have.
And if
give me your point of view, Ross, because I've given my little rant.
Well,
so what is your point of view?
I mean, it's a bit like the Barbie doll, the original one, was very, very skinny. And you said aspirational. Now, I'm not sure about that. I think the Barbie doll is just a toy, and that's all it should be. If it was just viewed as a toy, absolutely fine. But if you're saying that the Barbie doll is now an aspirational figure that young girls would try and emulate, I'm not sure that is a good thing, because the Barbie doll itself, although it's a doll, if it's too skinny, a lot of girls physically can't get to that size because of their build. And so it's a bit like the media itself when they Photoshop images of girls and make them look incredible, but they're, the waists and the hips and all that, there's no physical human that actually looks like that. And
Let me interrupt you. That is a very good point. And I think we need to go back and roll back a little bit, that the Barbie should be a healthy figure.
Yes. If it's a healthy figure.
So I have to roll back a little bit and say healthy aspiration. I have to roll back a little bit, because if it's going to be unhealthy and unachievable, then there's not much point. If that was the point that these land rails were making, then they've got a point. But I wasn't taking it like that. I was taking it that the Barbie, as I remember, I think the first Barbie was based on Marilyn Monroe, and no one's going to call her thin.
No, but the Barbie doll didn't look like Marilyn Monroe. The face did, but the body shape was just very, very skinny, very, very thin. And that's the difference. And I think that's where a lot of women were moaning about this Barbie doll, because you said yourself it's an aspirational figure, but it's not actually achievable. Young girls looking at it thinking, I want to be like Barbie, they would never achieve it because it's physically not possible. So if you're right, if the Barbie doll was more proportional, let's put it that way, and represented different genders and identities around the world, then yeah, you could view it in that respect and say, yeah, it's fine. It's just a toy. It's a doll that looks nice. I wouldn't mind being dressed like Barbie and look like Barbie. Then that's absolutely fine. But if you're now holding something that's not achievable physically because it's a doll that's so skinny that you're never going to, most women will never ever in a million years get to that size, then you are psychologically affecting young girls who can't make that decision and thought process in their head to think, well, it's just a doll. They then will feel psychologically affected in a negative way. So I'm agreeing with the people that come forward and said that with the original Barbie, but I haven't seen the Barbie doll now. This is what I'm saying. Is it still on sale? Has it taken on board?
It's still on sale, as far as I can tell. They were still pumped out in 2018, and I haven't seen anything that says they're no longer being pumped out.
Does it look the same? Is there variation in it? Or is it still the same blonde, blue-eyed Barbie doll?
Well, there was as long ago as 1980, apparently, there were complaints about the lack of diversity in the line. And starting in 1980, Mattel responded. Mattel, by the way, is the owners of Barbie. They responded by producing Hispanic dolls. So I don't think they've quite gotten around to producing African type dolls.
Really?
Oh, sorry. The first African-American Barbie doll made her debut in 1968.
Oh, wow.
So,
So
quite
we have
frankly,
got them. So what's the issue here?
well, critics argued that in the African American community, the name of the Barbie was Oreo. What the hell?
Real. So it's not called Barbie. It's just a
You know,
friend.
Oreo. Do you know what Oreo is? It's an insult.
Oh, is it? Ah,
There's an insult in the black community. It's black on the outside and white on the inside, like the biscuit.
oh, I see.
And they called it Oreo.
Okay,
That's
maybe they
actually
didn't do their
insulting.
research. Yeah, maybe they
No,
didn't do
come
their
off it.
research.
Of all the things in the world, you can't come off it, Tony. If
Yeah.
you believe that, I'll sell you a couple of bridges in London this afternoon. Come off it. Quite clearly, that is the one word in the whole of the English language that'll be Oreo.
Oh dear. Oh dear.
And it's
Okay.
968, so it's entirely, that was America. That's actually, I shouldn't be laughing but it's really funny.
Okay. Well, so currently, then you can get a lot of Barbie
Yes, but
dolls.
we need to do a little
diverse.
bit more research than this throwaway thing we're doing this afternoon.
Yeah.
I don't know what the current state of the Barbie is. I would say that an aspirational Barbie, which helps guide a mental image, if you like, of a healthy body and lifestyle, is obviously a good thing. But if it's not doing that, then there are issues with it. So I don't want to sit on the fence, but that's just how it is for me. I genuinely believe that it should be aspirational, and if it is, good. And then if it isn't aspirational, then yeah, I think there are problems with it.
Okay. What about? I mean, slightly along the same line, but digressing a little. Obviously, there's a Barbie doll and there's a Ken, which is the male equivalent. Would you? And again, is there any diversity in the Ken doll? Whether they continue that, and is that helpful, or do you prefer the Action Man doll for the males? Because that used to be a
you know Tyre well enough by now. What do you think I'm going to say? Seriously, is that waving a red flag to a bull, a boy playing with dolls? So you smack him upside his stupid head. What are you doing? Get out there and do some kung fu, idiot! What the hell? What are you playing with dolls for?
Was an army man, wasn't it?
Yeah, an action man. Yeah, army man. That's fine. Guns, explosions, all sorts of manly things like that. I don't mind. I'd buy my, nephews action man figures and packs and whatnot. No problem whatsoever. But a Ken? What?
I think the Ken was actually more for girls to buy.
Yeah, well, yeah, a doll, anything's got doll with it. It's just nothing goes anywhere near a male relative of mine. And unlike Kevin Hart, I am not going to take that back. So you can forget it. In fact, I invite you to contact me so that I can insult you to your face.
Let's move on.
Let's
move off this particular subject.
You see why I don't say good hello to the audience?
Indeed, and the audience are thinking the same back.
They're not really my audience, man. They're your audience. I've told you before.
Right, let's quickly move on. Let's change.
Let's
park that one now. Okay, but again, listeners, let's have your viewpoints of it. But we're going to no longer discuss that particular one. But we'd love to hear your viewpoint on it. Right, here's another one. This is something I've come back. I've thought of, and I will ask you first. Is if you had a choice that you could travel in time, would you travel 100 years to the future? Or would you rather travel 100 years back in time? But that's your limit, 100 years. Where would you go, forward or back?
Okay, so such a question can only be asked by a white man or a white person.
Why?
What black person would want to go back to 1922? Tell me seriously, where? If you go back to 1922 in America, they were still lynching people in America in 1922, still lynching black men. My country, Nigeria, had only just 4 years earlier been carved out of different tribes who had no intention of ever living together in a country. And we were under the rule and thumb of the British. And we were non-entities in our own land. And the rest of Africa was very much like that too. So going back 100 years is not something that a black person would consider doing.
Okay.
Which
makes sense, absolutely. I'm for myself, I would never go backwards. What you're doing? I mean, you can go back and observe, but you wouldn't be able to change. It's the past. You can't change the past. Whereas it would be interesting for most people, I suspect, to go 100 years in the future and see how
things have been really effed up.
Well, yeah. I mean, we can do a show on this particular topic, let's be honest, about, and I think that's something we are planning, where we're going to look ahead and see where we as a species, as a planet, as humans have gone 100 years or even more into the future.
I don't think we'll be here, Tony.
Will we be here?
I don't think we will be here.
Do you honestly believe that human race won't be here in 100 years' time?
I really believe that the human race won't be here in 100 years' time. I really believe that the war I thought was going to start after 2030, between 2030 and 2050. I believe that war is coming up a lot faster than I expected. Once people start moving around their nuclear forces, I think this is 1918, and we may not even get around to seeing 2023. The way things are going. So
I'm more positive than you. I'm hoping and believing actually that we will see sense. And yes, you're right. This is not the best of, I didn't want it to go down this route. I thought this would be a more upbeat question to see where we would be in the future, whether we've gone past our difficulties and actually resolve them, because like adults should be. We should.
Well, you can ask the question like this: if we haven't blown ourselves to bits in the next 12 months,
okay,
where will we be in 100 years? Then in 100 years' time, it's still not good news, because in 100 years' time, the West would have definitely lost its premier position. I mean, it's almost doing that now. I was shocked to find out that the UN report is that Far East Asia has basically caught up with the West. It's a 50-50 parity now, wealth-wise, and is well on its way to overtaking the West. And with the West committing suicide, basically economic suicide, with the sanctions on Russia and showing everybody that you can't trust SWIFT, it makes the Chinese CIPS system, whatever they call it over there, it makes that look a lot more attractive. And then at the same time, you're switching off cheap oil and cheap gas, which is also now flowing to the East, by the way. So industrially, the East is going to be more competitive, and the West is going to be less competitive. And year after year after year, that's going to make a huge difference. It's not going to make a huge difference in the next few months. No. We're talking a long term here, 5, 10, 15, 20 years.
But we're moving away from the petrodollar.
No, I'm trying to say that. Sorry?
We're moving away from the petrodollar. That's now making the shift faster. So,
well, exactly, because people keep putting on the sanctions and you're trying to wreck your economy.
But we're moving away from the reliance on fossil fuels, and this is just an acceleration of it.
Isn't that exactly a lie, though, Tony? I mean, isn't that the lie we're being told? Who is moving away from that? Where it's not like last year, there was no wind in Europe, in Britain. I mean, if you're saying we're going into nuclear power and nuclear energy, that makes sense.
Yes.
If you're saying we're going back into coal, fine.
That's what I'm thinking. Not coal. I think nuclear. I think there will be now a drive to bring nuclear back on the table for clean, cheap, sustainable energy.
You can't use clean and nuclear together in the same sentence.
Well, you can with a new modern.
No, because the waste product is the waste product. It's the waste product that's the issue.
Yeah, it's the half-life of the uranium that takes.
Which is like forever, basically.
Yeah.
Right, and it's so dangerous. It is so toxic. I mean, people think that, I don't know, the most poisonous snake in the world is toxic. It's got nothing on this blooming uranium thing.
Yeah.
Right? Tiny amounts of it get into your blood system, you're dead.
You're dead, yeah.
Right?
Which is why they're worried about what's happening in Ukraine with the power station. And
that is why actually, I think that is why, unspoken in the West, that is why there is an understanding between Ukraine and Russia, and those power stations are actually off the table.
Yeah.
Because I suppose it's good that Chernobyl happened in Ukraine, because that taught the Ukrainians, look, man, we don't need this hassle.
Yeah.
You know?
Although the technology, like I must stress, has moved forward in leaps and bounds, I mean, even the one in Fukushima in Japan, when they had that nuclear problem, that was obviously caused by an earthquake. Yes, there was problems there, but it was nowhere near on the scale of what Chernobyl. And a lot of the latest nuclear power plants that they're designing, that they have plans for, are much, much smaller, much easier to create.
Yeah,
and
mini reactors.
Yeah, mini reactors that they don't pump out anywhere near as much, and they're nowhere near as dangerous. Yes, uranium itself is the issue with spent uranium, how you got to deal with it, but the actual power plant itself is far, far safer. And there's also fail safes that they put in which neutralize the potential that even if it was bombed, the new ones anyway, are automatically switched off before the containment area is damaged in any way. There's all these fail safes that turn it all off. So in terms of safety for nuclear power plants, that has been vastly improved. But you're right, the uranium, the spent uranium is the issue still. So it's not clean. But unless they figure out, why do you think what's happening in CERN? CERN, they're trying to figure out fusion rather than fission, which is how nuclear power plant, because obviously at the moment they're using uranium to create fission, which is
now they're a game changer. If
that is a game fusion changer. That's why
everything changes overnight.
Totally, because
you can take your fossil fuels and you can naff off.
Yeah, exactly. Indeed. And why do you think the question is CERN? Why do you think they've spent all these millions not to discover what the universe is? It's to create fusion, because if they get fusion to work and in enough quantities, then our energy problems have been the worldwide energy problems have been resolved overnight. We literally can dispense of fossil fuels. Fusion is clean. There's no byproduct of it other than energy. And it literally will be able to, and cold fusion, mind you, is the answer, where you can create these experiments at room temperature, as opposed to at the moment, they're having to go to lower temperatures in order to create it. And they have managed to succeed in small quantities, but it's the keeping it at the cold level, which is the expense, which doesn't make it viable just yet. So if they can create it closer, even at I think it was minus 80, if they can get close to minus 80, we have a viable product that can be created in a power station, and that would be, an abundance of fuel with no byproduct. It's incredible.
Just as a layperson who knows nothing about this, I don't know the physics of this at all, at zero. But if you need minus 80 to spark cold fusion, I wouldn't have thought that minus anything would have been a problem, as long as you're getting more energy out of it than you're putting into it.
Yeah. I mean, minus 80 is easy to achieve with industrial refrigerators.
No, you don't get what I'm saying. You have the energy coming from your cold fusion should be able to power whatever is keeping it cold. Now, that seems to me to be natively and instinctively, intuitively nonsensical, because that is beginning to look like an infinite power machine.
Yes.
Well, that never works. Obviously, it doesn't work.
No,
you can't have an infinite machine. What is it called again?
Is it an infinite machine? I know what you mean.
Infinite something.
Perpetual
motion machine. Okay, perpetual motion machine. But so we're not talking about motion here, but we are talking about energy. Somehow to go in a circle and yet perpetuate itself, instinctively that looks like nonsense on the right off the bat. So maybe it's because I don't understand, the situation.
Well, no, you wouldn't use the source of the energy itself, the creation, to keep itself cold. You'd have to have a separate source for that. But
where's that coming from?
Well, that you'd still have a separate source elsewhere to do it. So you'd have two power stations, but the net output is greater than what they're using to keep them cold.
If the net output is greater than what is being used to keep them cold, it's still in a closed system. Just looking at that system in itself. Okay, I suppose if you had a fossil fuel cooling station, so you still used fossil fuels to cool the fusion station, but then that doesn't make sense either. So I think there's a problem here, but let's not get hung up on it.
No. But yeah,
if you can pull it off, it would be fantastic. I don't think right now, from what you've told me, or based on what you told me, I don't think it's possible. But what do I know? I don't know anything. So, okay.
Okay. No, I think it is possible. And I think we're not that far away. And what this has done has accelerated that transition. Because if it's like a bit like COVID hit. And what did that mean? It meant that the minds of the planet had to come up with a solution quickly. And so scientists around the world, together with governments, knew they had to deal with this emergency as it was. And so that focused minds, they needed to get an answer quickly and a solution, and which is what they did. And this unfortunate issue where they're having to put sanctions on Russia, believing that that will stop them continuing their offensive, that's a topic for a separate time, means it's affecting the West negatively with their fossil fuel requirements, etc. However, this will accelerate the transition to a different form of fuel. So going back to our original question, because I'm mindful of the time here, if we travel 100 years in the future, and to answer you, whether we still are here, I think, being from a positive outlook, I think we will be still here, and the earth will have an abundance of energy. Whether that will fix everything is up for debate, but I think in 100 years' time, we will still be here, but our world will be drastically different. I'm not going to say better, but it'll be different. We will still be here, and there will be more of the planet, not industrialized, but there will be more people on the planet. We will have reached other planets in terms of our exploration, and we will have abundance in terms of food and resources because of the energy requirements being met. So that will make the planet better in that regard. But whether we're as a species are better, we'll still have the age-old problems that we've already discussed even here. The differences between the male and female, we still have all those geopolitical problems, but not to the same degree. I think our process, if you look through history, has improved despite what we think. We've learned lessons along the way, and we've had hot spots that seem to reset things. We need them every so often. And this is one of those moments now. This is resetting the human race. And I think things will then improve again afterwards. And we will still be here in 100 years' time. Do you have any final points on that before we end the show?
If we're still here in 100 years' time, I will expect it to be the age of China. I'd expect that China would be by then the preeminent power on the globe. And I think it would be a very Chinese culture, global culture, which means a far less exuberant one than the Western culture. And I'm not sure that the people in 100 years' time will be happier than the people of today.
All right. Unfortunately, with that, we have reached the end of the show for another week.